With electricity prices soaring, rural businesses throughout Australia say they're at breaking point. To stay afloat, they're going off the grid and using alternative power sources. And as Regional Affairs reporter Lucy Barber reports, for some the solution isn't solar, it's a much dirtier option, diesel.
My dad started off in 1953 as a blacksmith in the backyard. And now we've grown to 43 people in Rockhampton here, making springs for four-wheel drives and exporting them all around the world.
Glenn Dobinson is proud of how far this family business has come. He's trying to take a step back to allow the younger generation to take over. But that's proving difficult. The company's electricity bills have skyrocketed in the past decade.
Back in 2007, our power bill was about 100 to 110,000 a year in, year out previous to that. It's now around about 350,000 a year.
He's worried that figure could double again by 2020 when Queensland's regional electricity distributor Ergon changes the way it charges small businesses like his for electricity.
We'll have a daily service fee of about $155,000 per year. Then we'll have a demand charge, which is around about another $180,000 a year. Then we have our power bill on top of that.
Ergon says tariff changes are designed to encourage people to use less electricity during peak periods. For the past 8 years, energy companies have said they need extra investment to pay for poles and wires.
The network pricing was driven partly because people had assumed that consumption was growing and would continue to grow. That meant that the network businesses were required to build more and more network to meet growing demand. It turned out that by the time they realised what was going on, electricity consumption had actually been falling for a whole range of reasons. And now the big question is, who pays for that?
Desperate to keep his business viable, Glenn Dobinson is looking at ways to get off the grid. Solar panels are saving him $11,000 a month, but they're no use when the sun doesn't shine, like early in the morning when his furnaces need to be fired up. Battery storage would solve that, but it'd cost up to $4 million to install. So he's looking into a dirtier option, diesel.
I feel like we're going back to the future, really. Yeah, my dad had diesel forges and other diesel run gear in the old shop in the other side of town, so I feel like we're going backwards.
But he's not the only one. This area is famous for its fertile red soil. Locals say that you can grow anything, all you need to add is water. But irrigation is expensive because power prices are so high. And that means a lot of farmers simply can't afford it.
Switch off the pumps and go back to dry land, and that impacts upon the productivity of the region and impacts upon jobs, not only at the sugar mill, but harvesting jobs and also jobs in town, small businesses, butcher shops, people like that. The other option that we've got is to go off-grid and look at alternatives, and diesel right now stacks up.
Yeah, look, at current prices, diesel's about 30% cheaper to run, to pump water.
One of the country's biggest sugar producers says its power bills have doubled in the last 5 years.
I'm a 10 in terms of my frustration. I just don't understand what's happening, and I struggle to get anyone to explain to me what's happening and why.
Farm businesses have access to a federal government rebate on diesel fuel. Simon Doyle says even without that discount, diesel would be more cost-effective than electricity.
When your back's to the wall, I guess you don't have the luxury of thinking about how environmentally friendly diesel is versus electricity.
Right across rural Australia, farmers are grappling with how to cut back their electricity use.
You wouldn't be able to print how pissed off I am. We've really had a gutful of it.
Alan Dingle is a fourth-generation sugarcane grower. He uses one diesel pump, but he's reluctant to abandon the grid altogether.
The other issue is if I went to diesel, all I do is put my share of what I was paying before in electricity prices onto all my neighbours, and their prices increase as well.
Electricity pricing is a complex beast. The national electricity market rules dictate that the price paid by consumers is largely influenced by the value and estimated running costs of the individual electricity companies.
It is something of a racket.
Energy economist Bruce Mountain says state governments who still own electricity networks are raking in billions of dollars from energy companies each year by using the pricing rules to their advantage.
The main reason why the network charges have risen is because the regulator's valuation of the network has risen, and that more expensive asset base has to be charged for. They can reduce prices by revaluing those assets down to closer to a market valuation.
The trick here is that we've set up these markets with the fundamental principle being that the companies, the regulators and the governments are supposed to be developing and maintaining a system in the long-term interests of all consumers. All those regulatory arrangements are put in place, are properly monitored and managed to ensure that the prices that are charged for those services reflect the real costs of what's going on.
The Queensland Government says support's on offer for regional businesses struggling to meet higher charges. Glenn Dobinson says it won't help him.
I want to keep employing local people and making a great product, but without the direction and being competitive, I lose a lot of sleep over it, yeah.